This is Between the Brackets, a MediaWiki podcast, episode 52, January 21st, 2020. Hello, I'm Yaron Koren, and welcome to the 8th installment of BTB Digest, the clip show for the MediaWiki enthusiast on the go. There's 5 more great episodes to recap, and this one is a very international group. There's a Bulgarian who lives in Spain, a Belgian who lives in Germany, a German who lives in France, plus a native Frenchman and our first ever South American from Argentina. So let's get to the clips. All the way back in September, I talked to Olga Vasileva, who is a product manager in the Reader's Web team, or is it the Reading Web team, at the Wikimedia Foundation. When we talked, she said that the team was undergoing a restructuring and would get a name change, among other things. That hasn't happened yet, so for now they're stuck with the name that's either Reading Web or Reader's Web. Anyway, Olga is one of the people in charge of improving the so-called desktop interface for MediaWiki and Wikipedia. That's a process that involves a lot of consultation and user testing, but for this first clip, I put her on the spot and asked her what kind of changes she personally would like to see. Here's what she said.
Well, so we just did a lot of interviews, so I have a lot of answers based on that and kind of on the research that we've done. But to me, I think the most important thing is to have a navigation that makes sense, which is kind of the issue with Vector, in my opinion, is that right now a lot of it doesn't. That's kind of going to be our focus, I think, for the project, is cleaning up the navigation and then some small, more like aesthetic cleanup that does not change functionality. So we don't want to change any functionality or do anything crazy. But I think things that we do want to see is have things like search be more prominent, have languages be a little bit more prominent, so they don't end up under the fold, for example, on some wikis and some articles right now they do. Things we want to see is the navigation sort of make sense. Like, a lot of the items in the sidebar right now are not things that you use on a regular basis, and a lot of them are. So kind of split that up and put the ones that are more used in a place where you can get to them easier and, kind of still have them available, but have less prominence on the ones that are not that helpful, like the store, for example, or, some of the other things in that sidebar that are not particularly useful.
Yeah. So for search, for example, the idea is that it's like a floating search bar. That's what I understood from the slides. It moves as you scroll down
potentially
the page.
So where we are right now is we're exploring sort of more ideas, and while we have a couple of prototypes that we want to bring to Wikimedia to play with, I think right now we're more focused on identifying the things that make sense. So we know that we want to make search more prominent, and we have one prototype that shows the way that might happen, but we also might have another one later on after getting feedback that does that in a different way. But yeah, the one right now is basically creating a sticky header that has a couple of things in it. So it could have things like search in it. It could have things like, we're not sure about this yet, but things like table of contents, for example, or the edit button, or the talk. Yeah. So as you're scrolling through the page, if you need to get to the talk page, you can click on that button. That will take you right there without having to go up and down all the time. So that's definitely something that we're exploring, something I think we're probably going to go with, but at this stage of the project, we haven't, kind of made any of those decisions. And we definitely, with this, we want a lot of feedback. And, if anyone's interested, like, there is a project page right now that has some of the ideas that we're working with, and also a bunch of the research that we've gone through, which includes, just both papers and research that we've had, but also we have like kind of a list of gadgets and user scripts and other skin experiments that other people have done that we're sort of kind of stealing ideas from, in terms of things that have worked. The idea is to like make the ones that do work and people do like kind of available to everyone, rather than, having them just be as a user script or just be as a gadget.
A lot of people running their own MediaWiki sites have switched to so-called responsive skins like Timeless and Chameleon, which can look equally good on a desktop and on a smartphone. I asked Olga whether this desktop improvement project could end up just producing a responsive skin. Here's what she said to that.
It's too early to say. I mean, something that in terms of responsive skins, like something we're definitely concerned about is performance. Like right now, the mobile site is, while the skin itself is a little bit larger, the mobile site is like a little bit faster and lighter than, basically loading all of the things the vector loads. So that's something that matters, especially if we're going
Okay.
to have one skin. That's something that we really want to think about. That's kind of not necessarily a huge issue with responsive skins, but something that we have to think about. And there's
Yeah.
also, some other questions in terms of, okay, well, we would like it to not only be, in a perfect world, we would like it to not only be responsive, but also to be modular. So, for example, there's certain things like this idea of micro contributions, where you make like really small edits to like pieces of text that things like, the apps, for example, have been exploring. That are really, really great for mobile, but are not necessarily so great for desktop. So, I think another part of that conversation in terms of responsiveness is not only responsive in terms of like the screen size and everything fits, but also like having the ability to like load individual features based on the platform and the device that you're on. And that's a
Yeah.
little, and at that point it gets a little bit trickier.
Yeah. Okay. I hadn't I hadn't heard of that micro edits thing. I don't know if you mentioned it in one of your talks there, but I mean, what would the interface for that look like if it's not if it's different from regular editing?
We don't know so far, but I think it depends. I think the apps have done a lot of work into looking into things from that perspective. I mean, I think editing Wikidata descriptions, for example, is something that's like fairly easy and straightforward. But
Oh,
also,
okay, yeah.
kind of, there's ideas on, okay, I want to highlight this paragraph and just open the editor for this paragraph, or I just want to open the editor for this sentence and change a comma. And that's a lot quicker than
Right.
like loading the entire editor, and doing things like that. But also, is that the kind of functionality that you would want on desktop? I guess that's kind of the. It makes so much sense on the phone, but on desktop, maybe not. Maybe you want the whole thing. And I
Right.
think
Right.
those very mobile specific workflows do need more time to really be thought out and to be kind of designed for mobile rather than adapted from desktop to mobile.
Olga's dog made a cameo appearance at the end there. Next, I talked to Felipe Schenone, a volunteer developer and MediaWiki consultant from Argentina, also known as Sophivirus or Sophivirus. Here he is talking about a very useful extension of his, Wikipedia extracts, which is already popular on the Spanish language Wikipedia, but which he's been trying to promote elsewhere.
Basically, it's a parser function which brings the introduction from any Wikipedia article and just slaps it in there in your page, which sounds like really basic, but it's really, really, really efficient for, say, for in Wikiversity, if you go and search for an article on philosophy, many times, there's many things you can do on that article, but usually you want some kind of introduction to the topic, and it makes no sense to try to recreate what already has been done in Wikipedia. So
Right.
this parser function just brings the introduction and or the whole article if you want, and put it in there in the page. You can wrap it with a template just to give it some frame, to say, extract it from Wikipedia. And this allows to save a lot of work, to keep the content updated, to drive contributors back to Wikipedia. And it can be used, not just in Wikiversity, but in any wiki. And I use it a lot, and some of my clients do too. So that one I'm really proud of. I think it's a simple idea, but really useful.
Yeah. Yeah, when you put it that way, I've actually had I recall at least one consulting project where people asked us if that kind of thing existed. That was a long time ago, but yeah, it makes sense. If you have a page on some topic that's already covered in Wikipedia, there's no point, you know, either recreating content or copying over the content. You should just query it.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact,
So you can get
yeah, sorry.
yeah. So and you can get it. You can go to any language Wikipedia.
Yeah, it usually defaults to the language of your wiki.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So if you're in a Spanish wiki, we'll query the Spanish Wikipedia, but you can change that from parameters.
Yeah.
So that one's really good. And in fact, there is, if there's one thing that sort of it may be common throughout some of my work. I won't say it's all of it, but this content reusing, I think it's really, really important, especially to make the most out of the few resources we have, by which I mean volunteer time. So, for example, you got the Wikipedia extracts, and then if you browse through my user page, you go to cascading content, it will take you to a link either in the English or the Spanish Wikipedia, depending on which one you clicked, which basically links, it's some information on a template I created, which basically extracts the introduction from one Wikipedia article and allows you to put it into another Wikipedia article, all right?
Yeah, okay.
So that is really, really useful for many articles. Say, for example, the philosophy article in Spanish used to have a section for metaphysics, which was basically a summary of the article on metaphysics.
Right, yeah.
So what I did was, I grabbed that section and merged it with the article, and then I extracted the introduction of the metaphysics article and put it in the philosophy article. You follow?
Sure, yeah.
So then I did that with every other section, like logic, ethics, and then with the history sections and methodology sections, all sections that used to have a main article associated are now merely extracts of the introduction of the articles.
Yeah.
So this makes it much more efficient, and there's this technique and a sort of tree, because then the metaphysics article reuses content from other more specific articles.
Right. Yeah.
So this makes a tree, and this is catching on the Spanish Wikipedia.
I should note that about a month after that episode aired, Felipe renamed Wikipedia extracts to InterWiki extracts, making it a more generic tool. After that was Clément Flipo, who co-runs the site Wikifab, as well as the company Docket, which creates internal how-to sites for companies. I asked Clément about what I still think is their biggest technical achievement, which is creating the extension they called VE for Pageform, which was later renamed to VE for All, which lets you insert MediaWiki's visual editor into any text area in any form on the wiki. Here's Clément talking about that extension, which was mostly created by his business partner Pierre Boutet.
Yeah, the story behind it is pretty funny, because I think it was like 2 weeks after we launched Wikifab, I told Pierre, so we knew no one from the community. Right. We were like a little electron, working on a MediaWiki website, and no one knew us, and we knew nobody.
Yeah.
So Pierre, we started to do this website with Pierre, and I told Pierre, why couldn't we have like WYSIWYG stuff on our text area field? And he said, because it's not in page form, we can't do that. And I said, but It's very strange. There is VE on page. There is VE on Wikipedia. Why can't you have it on this? And he said, it's a bit. He said, I don't know. It might be a bit complicated and all. And I said, look what they have done with Flow. And there are this little text area field on Flow. And Pierre looked into it and said, yeah, it's nice. It's interesting. It's made a little bit differently. Maybe we can extend it to put it on page form. And I think I don't know exactly because I'm not a developer, but I think he looked at the code of how the VE field were integrated into Flow. And then he said maybe I should do the same, or he were able to do the same for page form. And after maybe 2 weeks of development, or one or 2 weeks, I don't remember exactly, we had our first version, and we could do it on page form. And then the funny thing is, like, we released it and we found out that lots of people were interested into it.
Oh, okay.
And it was pretty funny because we didn't use those people, and thanks to this extension, we knew lots of people. So it was a good entrance for us.
Oh, that's interesting. All of a sudden, everybody wanted to be your friend or something. Yeah. I was wondering about that. How long it took? Because people had been asking me about getting visual editor for page forms for a long time, since 2013 or something, when visual editor first really was launched, and I kept saying, I don't think it's possible. But then Pierre did it in 2 weeks, so that's pretty cool. Some MediaWiki-based companies make a big deal about MediaWiki, and others barely mention MediaWiki at all. Docket falls into the latter group, and I asked Clément about why they did it that way.
Right now, it's deliberate. We've tried to not mention Wiki too often on our website. It's deliberately because we think it doesn't. It could give more confusion to our customers who visit the website. But if he wants to understand how it works, if he goes to every pages, he will see that it's a wiki. However, is it a good solution or not? Still, I don't know. We're still young. Maybe we could start some other strategy. I know that we used to be well referenced on Enterprise MediaWiki on Google.
Oh, really? When people looked for the words Enterprise MediaWiki, you were high in the
We are
results?
high, but not so many people are typing this, I think.
Well, yeah, right.
We used to be high, but still we are only maybe on page 2 now.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, we are on page 2. I mean, on my website, on my computer at least. So but this, if people is looking for a wiki and they find Docket, maybe that's not also what they're looking for. So it doesn't make sense for us to be there. Or otherwise we need to change all of the product to make it more wiki. How to say more like user like a wiki, but it's not.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, you guys have a specific product or product that you guys provide as opposed to my company WikiWorks is just a MediaWiki consulting company. It's a very different kind of approach.
Yeah, because the typical use case is you are a manufacturer and you want to create a user manual for your product. What do you type? You're on Google. You type user manual platform or user manual step-by-step instruction, but you don't tap wiki.
Right.
So it doesn't make sense, for us to just put wiki everywhere on our website. I mean, it's not relevant.
Yeah. So what happens when somebody contacts you and finds out it's a wiki? Does that ever turn people off?
No, never. No,
Okay.
It's more like usually they say, "Oh, it's a wiki. It's interesting." When they know what it is, they say, "Oh, it's a wiki, so it's more powerful than what you propose." And we say, "Yeah, it's more. You can do more than what we propose. We can create bespoke template for you if you want, and then it's even better."
That was nice to hear. In the next episode, I talked to Jeroen De Dauw, who has played a significant part in both Semantic MediaWiki and Wikibase/Wikidata. During our talk, Jeroen said there was one question he knew I was going to ask, which was to compare the Wikibase, Semantic MediaWiki, and Cargo extensions, since they all in theory do the same thing, which is enable data storage and querying. I did indeed ask that question, and here's part of his answer, comparing Wikibase and Semantic MediaWiki specifically.
I've actually been contacted recently by a bunch of people asking me, should I use Semantic MediaWiki or Wikibase? And one of them linked an item on Quora, this question-answer site from 2014, where somebody was asking that exact question. So should I use Semantic MediaWiki or Wikibase for my use case? And my answer from back then, 5 years ago, is still quite current. I think that for most people, you do not want to be using Wikibase at the moment because of some fundamental issues there. So one of them is that there are no releases of the software. So there's just a development copy and you can install that. But then there will be breaking changes to all kinds of things, and this will not really be documented. So I think for most serious users, that already makes it a no-go. Also, Wikibase So a bit of history there is that Danny and Marcus created Semantic MediaWiki with Wikipedia in mind, right? They wanted to create this structured Wikipedia, and for various reasons, this Semantic MediaWiki never got onto Wikipedia, but it turned out to be very useful for many other use cases, and so it's now installed on thousands of public wikis. And then later, when Danny got funding for Wikidata, the idea was, let's create a software that's really specifically aimed at the use case of Wikipedia and not do any of the other stuff. So that's what Wikibase is at the moment. It's really focused on the Wikipedia use case, and till perhaps maybe very recently, essentially all the development effort has been solely focused on that. So it just doesn't have the features that Semantic MediaWiki and Cargo have that are aimed at the typical non-Wikipedia use cases. So that's a second big point. And then another one is, I suppose that one is kind of more political in some way. Since the software is really developed by Wikimedia Deutschland for the Wikipedia use case, and that's always going to be the priority, you're not in a very good position as a company relying on that. And for instance, recently the foundation itself said they are kind of phasing out support for third parties more than they've been doing in the past. So I think Semantic MediaWiki is a much safer bet, and it has the functionality that you would expect. While in case of Wikibase, it doesn't have like inline queries like Cargo and Semantic MediaWiki have, and also the data model is a bunch more complex, which is needed for Wikipedia. Right, so the population of New York is not just one number; it's like this number according to that survey. And if you don't need that and you don't need the multilingual support, it's going to get in your way because it's not optional. It's going to always be in there, and you cannot turn it off.
And the last set of clips for this episode comes from my talk with Jan Höffler, an academic who runs the site Replication Wiki. This was the first ever live interview for Between the Brackets from a cafe in Philadelphia, which is why there's some background noise. I asked Jan how the software setup of MediaWiki, plus a bunch of extensions including page forms and Semantic MediaWiki, was working out for them. Here's what he said.
Very well. I mean, the original idea of mine was just to use a wiki. I didn't know of the Semantic MediaWiki, but a student of mine came up with that, and it turned out very well. I mean, it's a very good structure, and especially the form thing helps us a lot, because I think, to make academics contribute is already difficult, and to make them use some markup language that they haven't seen before is impossible.
Right.
For most of them. The economists even use a lot of code in their, especially the people who work empirically, they are used to code, but still to use a markup language would be difficult, and with the forms it's so easy. That is good. What we have had is a couple of economists have added the results of their replications to the wiki just to share it, and that kind of works. So I think what we still need is we need to expand the database so that more or less all empirical researches can be found easily, and I think then people become more aware, okay, this is the place where you have to put your replication results.
We also talked about the open science movement and the various ways that the internet can affect how science is done.
I'm very hopeful about this open science movement. I think it's a big movement. There's a lot of people who became aware that this is a problem, that people don't have access to materials, to already the texts. And this is changing, and I hope in a couple of years this will have changed in a way that there's more open access publishing, there's more access to data. And if that happens, then there will also be more applications, for example. And what I hope especially is that the small contributions, like the one in Wikipedia, are counted more. Because at the moment you only make your career by publishing big journal articles. You don't have to necessarily publish them alone. You can publish them in teams, but still, if you don't have these big publications, then you don't make a career. And there are, like in Wikipedia, so many possibilities to make a real contribution by just adding something small. You may find a small error in a study, but this error changes the result dramatically. That is a contribution, and that should be counted.
Yeah.
And I hope that mechanisms will be found that this can be somehow counted towards the CV of a researcher. There are movements already to, for example, not to measure scientific contributions just by the impact factors of the journals where people publish, but, for example, by how they are quoted on Twitter, for example. I'm not so convinced by that, because, I mean, that runs into the problem of populism in academia. But this is the easy way where you find data.
And that's it for this BTB Digest. Have a happy new year, everyone, and I'll see you next time with an all-new guest.